right, welcome to another episode of Tech Talk Tuesday. It's technically only our second one of the new year due to a communication snafu last week. But this was the topic we were going to talk about last week: zero trust implementation for small businesses. There's a lot of small businesses out there. Well, there's a lot that don't know what zero trust is, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. But there's a lot of businesses out there, small businesses, that feel like they can't afford zero trust, and that is absolutely not true. Matter of fact, I would say you can't afford not to have zero trust at this point, given the some of the numbers that are coming out of 2023. It was not a good year for cybersecurity attacks, ransomware attacks, data breaches, and so forth. Record numbers in healthcare, record numbers in financial world. Not a good year at all. So we're going to talk about zero trust implementation for small businesses. And the subtitle for this presentation: Never Trust, Always Verify. That's really the theme of zero trust. You never want to trust anything, even if it looks legitimate. You're going to want to verify that it is legitimate. So welcome. I am Scott Gumber. I'm the CISO and the owner of Nuage Tech. We are a proactive IT service provider. We also do a lot with compliance, and zero trust is a big part of what we do. Try to have a little humor in here. I don't always think about cybersecurity, but when I do, it's too late. And there are a lot of businesses that think this way. They won't really invest into cybersecurity until it's too late. And then they open up the checkbook, so to speak, say, let's get this done, if it's not too late in general overall, meaning are we able to recover from the damage? And a lot of small businesses, 60%, in fact, go out of business after a data breach within 6 months. I just inherited a new client recently, and their IT provider definitely was not invested into cybersecurity, and finding all kinds of no longer supported applications and outdated equipment and outdated operating systems, things that are connected that shouldn't be connected. So not invested in cybersecurity. Yes, having an IT provider is great. Being able to fix things when things go wrong, that's great, but it's no longer enough to just have someone that fix things when they go wrong. You need to have someone that's going to make sure you're secure at all times. And that's the role we play. But you're gonna learn enough about zero trust today that you might be able to implement some of that yourself. So, all right, without further ado, what is zero trust? So zero trust is a security concept centered on the belief that organizations should not automatically trust anything inside or outside their perimeters, and instead must verify anything and everything trying to connect to its systems before granting access. The strategy around this concept is known as the zero trust security model. Now, I will say this: there's a good chance you're already using some forms of zero trust. As a matter of fact, if you use two-factor authentication, this is part of zero trust. You're putting in your password into, let's say, Microsoft or Google, and then you enter a code, or you approve the login on your phone, or some method of secondary authentication, and in some cases more than one form of, or sometimes a tertiary form of authentication. That is zero trust. That's Microsoft or Google saying, yeah, we don't trust that you are who you say you are just because you know the password. We need another way for you to verify that you are who you say you are. That is zero trust. That is part of implementing zero trust. So some aspects of zero trust have been around now for a little while, a few years. I don't know, 5-6 years, maybe, at least. And you may not have thought of it from that viewpoint, from the zero trust viewpoint. Zero trust is a little bit of a buzzword that's come around in the last few years. There's a great book, the Project Zero Trust, if you want to kind of understand zero trust in a fictional way. That's a great book to read, but there are lots of other great books that are helping, and we're going to help you understand. So here are some of the key principles and characteristics of zero trust model. Verify explicitly. Every access request should be fully authenticated, authorized, and encrypted before granting access. Encrypted is another key. regardless of where the request originates or what resource it accesses. So if we go back to my example of Microsoft or Google, in some cases, Microsoft email could be locked down to just the IP address of the business. So they don't want their employees to access the emails from home or on their phones or whatever else. So they just say, only allow it at this IP address. And this is another form of locking it down even further. Again, it depends on the business. And so your zero trust policies need to align with the business goals and the business objectives. But if you can make that work, then absolutely lock it down to that IP address. In reality, most businesses can't. And so what we do is we monitor for suspicious logins, usually outside of the United States or outside of a certain geographical area. Least privilege access, give users and devices the minimum access necessary to perform their jobs. This limits the potential impact of a breach. So, if you have a receptionist probably shouldn't have access to sensitive client information. If you have a receptionist at a healthcare practice, they shouldn't have access to the medical records of anybody checking in. There's no need for that. That's least privilege. Assume breach. The model operates under the assumption that threats exist both inside and outside of the network, and then realistically they do. If you've ever listened to me talk before, you know that people are the weakest link, whether it's intentional or not. Most breaches involve insider interaction at some point along the way. So therefore, no users or machines should be automatically trusted. Micro-segmentation. This technique divides security perimeters into small zones to maintain separate access for separate parts of the network. For example, a network with files in a single data center might have dozens of separate secure zones. Access to one zone doesn't give rights to access another zone. Another way to put this also is dividing your network into the different departments. So if you have a somewhat larger business, you have a marketing team, an HR team, a tech team, operations teams, all of those should be segmented so that if one group gets hacked and breached, then that doesn't mean the other groups will also be breached. Create separate networks. I have a client that has an auto dealership. They have sales on one network. They have service on another network. They have administrative staff on another network, which includes the office staff, the HR, and so forth. And so they're micro-segmented. So if something happens, only, we can minimize the blast area of the breach, so to speak. Continuous monitoring and validation. The security posture of users and devices is continually evaluated to ensure that security measures are not compromised. This is critical as it allows for a rapid response to threats. Monitoring is important, but not monitoring to the point of ignoring tickets, but monitoring to make sure that sensitive things are, logging onto servers, or IP addresses changing for certain devices, or certain events, monitoring for certain events on critical systems where there's data and so forth. Monitoring large data dumps. So if you suddenly see a bunch of data being moved, then we get an alert. Things like that. Security, automation, and orchestration. We probably know this as endpoint detection and response and security operations center and so forth at this point, but the zero trust model leverages technology to automate security processes, increasing efficiency and reducing the potential for human error. So endpoint detection and response, one of those methods, takes, if it finds something, it'll automatically quarantine it. Now you can go back in, unquarantine it if you feel that it was a false positive, and that's fine. I shouldn't say feel that it was a false positive. If you could prove that it was a false positive, you can unquarantine it, but it will automatically quarantine. And depending on the nature of the threat, it may also automatically disconnect it from the network. Whoops, got ahead of myself here. So here's another way to understand zero trust. Imagine your home with advanced security. Each room has a locked door requiring a unique key. Even if someone has a key to enter your house, like a family member, they can't access every room unless they have the specific key for each one. This is like zero trust in cybersecurity. Just because someone has access to one part of the network, like your house, it doesn't mean they can access all areas like the rooms. So your kids may have their rooms locked because they don't want other people in their room. That's zero trust. Each part of the network requires a separate verification, ensuring tighter security. Now, I will say, you're going to get some pushback on this if you implement it. Some people are going to say, why do I need to authenticate again? Why do I need to, connect to a different network? Why do I need to? Well, again, ultimately, it's for the protection of the business and even more importantly, the client data that you have on hand, and more likely you have on hand personally identifiable information or protected healthcare information. If you have this type of stuff, then you absolutely need to implement zero trust today. Again, the model, never trust, always verify. As a matter of fact, I am creating t-shirts. If you're interested in a t-shirt, let me know, and maybe I can hook you up. The importance of zero trust in today's cybersecurity landscape can be attributed to several factors: evolving threat landscape with the increasing sophistication of cyber attacks. Traditional security models, which often focus on defending the perimeter, are no longer effective. Zero trust assumes that threats exist both inside and outside traditional boundaries, making it more adept at handling modern threats. And like I said earlier, they do exist inside and outside, because if I get an email and that email hits my, most of the time phishing emails will hit you emotionally, and I decide I'm going to click on a link, so let's say we detected unusual activity in your bank account, and I click the link and it brings me to a landing page that looks like my bank, and I log in. Now somebody stole my credentials. That's an inside threat. I was not malicious in any way. I was not behaving in a malicious manner. I was not intending to cause harm, but because I panicked, because I didn't step back and say, is this real? I failed a phishing simulation, let's say. I failed by clicking on the link and entering my user information, and I now have become an insider threat. Again, not intentionally, although some of it is intentional, but in this case, not intentionally. It is still an insider threat. Increase in remote work. A lot of us are working from home. As a matter of fact, I just saw an article on LinkedIn that said that CEOs are basically giving up on full return to office because they're not getting 100% compliance, and they realize it's not going to happen. So remote work is here to stay. Despite what other people have said to you, it is here to stay. COVID-19 ushered it in violently, and it is not going to go back to normal status. Everybody in the office 5+ days a week for 40+ hours a week. That's not going to happen anymore for a lot of us workers. Cloud and BYOD environments. So the adoption of cloud services, which if you consider software as a service as part of cloud, this is a very large adoption rate at this point. And then bring your own device, where almost everybody brings their own smartphone into an environment. This poses a threat too. So this is why zero trust is important. And then, but we also have some businesses that have their own laptops and so forth. And now, if you have a business where you allow your employees or your contractors to use their own laptops, we have a method of we can't secure that laptop. We can't secure that device because it's not ours. It's not yours in the business. We can't say we're going to add all the software to your laptop and secure it further because it's not the business's laptop. But what we can do is create a virtual desktop for them. And then this way we can secure that and make sure the data doesn't leave the business. Data protection and privacy compliance. With the increasing importance of data privacy and implementation of regulation like GDPR, HIPAA, and others, there are tons of them out there now. The FTC safeguards rule. The state of Connecticut has the Connecticut Data Protection Act, and so other, Florida's implementing one next year. And to some degree, they already have some privacy rules, but they're going to implement a much broader privacy act next year. Many other states are starting to do this, and it's only a matter of time before the United States does this. You have all kinds of other compliance rules, depending on what business you're in, that you may have to adhere to. PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry. If you accept credit cards, you need to comply with that, and that's actually getting updated. I'm getting training on that, I think, next week. So these are all things that are in play. Reduced risks, threats reduced insider threats. By not automatically trusting any entity inside the network, Zero Trust helps mitigate risks posed by insider threats, whether due to a malicious intent or accidental breaches. And again, most of the time it is accidental. It's not usually malicious, but that does happen too. Scalability and flexibility in organizations grow. As organizations grow and evolve, their security solutions need to be scalable and flexible. Zero Trust models, being based on software-defined policies, are more adaptable to changing business environments than traditional hardware-based security perimeters. Again, another reason to go cloud more than ever before. It used to be thought of that cloud was cheaper. That's why it was better to go to the cloud. It's been proven that's not exactly true. However, in some ways it is true. And then when you consider scalability, it is definitely true. Network segmentation and micro-segmentation, we talked about that already, but segmenting networks into smaller, manageable parts, making it easier to monitor and secure sensitive data and systems. And if there's no need to have sensitive data on that segmentation, then by all means, take it off. Continuous monitoring and real-time decision-making. Zero Trust models emphasize the need for continuous monitoring and real-time decision-making, improving an organization's ability to respond quickly to threats. And then, in summary, Zero Trust aligns with the modern digital landscape where the traditional network perimeter has eroded, and where flexibility and adaptability and rigorous data protection are paramount. The traditional network that we're all familiar with is gone. We're interconnected more now than ever, and that's just going to continue to grow, which also continues to raise the threat levels. Some numbers here. High target rate. Small businesses are particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks. Reports indicated that up to 43% of cyber attacks were aimed at small businesses. So nearly half of all businesses in the world, of all attacks in the world, were aimed at small businesses. Lack of preparedness. A significant portion of small businesses were not adequately prepared for cyber threats. It was found that around 60% of small businesses didn't have a digital defense plan in place. The average cost of a cyber attack for a small business could exceed $200,000. A worrying statistic was that 60% of small businesses affected by a cyber attack went out of business within 6 months of an attack. I talked about that a moment ago. 43% of all data breaches were caused by insider, whether on purpose or not. And companies that suffer data breaches see a sharp decrease in repeat customers, with 55% of people in the U.S. saying that would take their businesses elsewhere. They would take their business elsewhere if they found out that your business was part of a data breach. Now, you do have a responsibility to report if you've been breached. So don't think, well, if I get breached, I can, I don't have to report. I don't want to lose these repeat customers. Well, then you're going to be subjected to other penalties, and those will vary depending on where you are in the world. Now, I want to point out, in the automobile industry, this number is much higher. I think it was 94%, significantly higher in the automobile industry. So something to think about. Small business networks often exhibit a range of vulnerabilities due to various factors like limited resources, lack of specialized expertise, and sometimes a lower prioritization of cybersecurity. Here are some of the most common vulnerabilities found in small business networks. Weak passwords. If your password is, password @ with an @ instead of an A, that's a weak password. That is actually on the list of most commonly compromised passwords. Lack of security software. And let me just say this. If you're planning to use Avast, AVG, Symantec, Norton, 360, McAfee, you may as well just stick with Windows Defender if you have a Windows network, because those are not going to cut it anymore. Yes, they had their day, some of them. They no longer have their day. You need endpoint detection and response. And that means that you have some system out there that's not just looking for a signature file for malicious software, malware. It's also looking for anomalies. It's also looking for things that shouldn't be happening, but are. It's looking for all different types of things. And then it could also take action based on what is going on. Insufficient patch management. I can't tell you how many times I've visited potential clients and found that their systems were severely outdated. I just saw computers I think 2 weeks ago that hadn't been patched since May of last year. So they were still pending updates from May 2023, almost a year. So that's 9 months ago, 9 months ago. And this is really bad because Microsoft releases security patches once a month on the second Tuesday of the month, and so does Apple. And if you're not patching on a regular basis, this is a problem. Poor network segmentation. You just allow everybody into everything. Unsecured wireless networks. I don't see this as much as I used to, but it still does happen. Scenario I recently ran into was a wireless network was connected to the internal network. This I do see. They give out the wireless network to customers that are in the business, and that wireless network connects to the internal network where the sensitive data is. Lack of employee training. This I see a lot of. Employees are not getting trained. Employees are not prepared and aware of the threats that are out there. And that includes phishing simulation. So we have training, and we have phishing simulation. This is all part of the training and awareness. Inadequate access controls. Who are you allowing to access different parts of data, different parts of the network? Use of outdated technology. I visited a business and they had a server 2008 and a server 2012 still running. These are severely outdated. Microsoft no longer supports them. You even get alerts in some cases that say this is outdated and we will no longer support it, and you are at risk. Lack of data encryption. How about that one? How many of you have BitLocker turned on your Windows desktop? Even if it's a desktop sitting at your desk in an office on the 15th floor of a 20-floor building and a locked office, it should still be encrypted. And you should be locking your workstation when you're not there. No regular security audits or testing. We do ongoing security audits and testing, and I get it. It's time consuming. It's very time consuming. But we do this ongoing as part of our plan. Inadequate backup and disaster recovery plans. You, at minimum, should have a backup plan for your critical data. And that backup plan should not be an external hard drive connected to your server in a closet somewhere. It should be, that's one method of backup. There should be multiple, and it should be at least one cloud backup for the critical data. Now, I'm not saying every workstation should get backed up, because realistically, you should not have sensitive data on your workstation unless there is no server. Unless you're a one-man show, then yes, have a workstation with data on it and get it backed up. And third-party and supply chain risks. We've seen over the last few years that third-party and supply chain risks are extremely high. I keep going back to the SolarWinds attack, but there was the MoveIt. I think it's MoveIt. I think it's called MoveIt. File transfer software that was breached in, I think, March or May of last year, and we're still seeing the fallout from that. That's third party. It's supply chain attack. Many different businesses were impacted by this. We see the news of all the healthcare businesses impacted by this, but it wasn't just healthcare. There were lots of different businesses that were impacted by a supply chain attack. Core components of zero trust. So here we go. Well, let's break it down. The core four. If you're a Yankee fan, you get the reference. Identity verification. We talked about this a little bit, making sure that the person who they say they are is who they say they are. Device security, network segmentation, and data protection. So identity verification we talked about, with not passwords not being enough, having at least 2 factors of authentication. And so I'll say this: if you have an app on your phone that generates a code, that's your second factor. But now if your phone has biometrics on it, you're sort of adding we'll call it a half a factor. So it's 2.5 factors at that point. There are YubiKeys and similar items out there that you can get, and instead of using a code on your phone, it's a physical device that you have to actually touch to log in. This eliminates the possibility of someone remotely doing it. Device security, again, your endpoint detection, having 24/7 SOC. SOC is short for Security Operations Center. These are all things that, and zero trust on your systems. So not allowing scripts to run, software to run without somebody first making sure that it's okay that it runs. Network segmentation, dividing your network up into smaller bite-sized pieces. It's not as hard as it sounds. It's really not. And then data protection, encrypting sensitive information. And this is encrypting sensitive information at rest, meaning sitting on your computer, not doing anything, sitting on a server, not doing anything. And also in transit, when you're sending it to someone, via email or whatever, making sure that it gets encrypted when it's sensitive. There are ways to encrypt data in use as well. So I have a document open with some personally identifiable information. It's technically not encrypted at that point. Even if it's encrypted at rest and encrypted when you send it, it's not encrypted if you're just open working on that document. There are ways to do that. If you're not sure how that works, give us a call. So how do we implement it? Or first, you have to assess your current security posture, understanding the existing network and assets. So you have to take an inventory of what you have. And this is the first failure that happens in a business. So here's an example. We have a small business, let's say 10 employees, and each employee has a workstation, and then maybe there's a file server. So you have 11 systems. This is what you get told. But what they don't tell you is that there are 2 other systems that run a screen of rotating, like a marketing display. And those are connected to the network. Well, guess what? Those count as part of your system in an inventory because they are connected. Identify critical assets. So where's the sensitive information being stored? What systems would be critical if they went down, would critically impact your business? A workstation that has no data on it, that only thing it gets used for is Outlook, isn't critical because we can quickly get another computer and put it in place and connect you back to your Outlook. So identifying critical assets within the business, analyzing current security measures, review existing security tools. What do you have now versus what should you have? Do you have a firewall? Do you have antivirus programs? Do you have intrusion detection systems? And if so, are they doing the job? Security policies and procedures. Do you even have an incident response plan? I'm guessing from small businesses, I'd venture to guess most of you don't. And then what happens if you do get breached? Who do you call? What do you do? What is the process for your employees? Identifying vulnerabilities and threats, vulnerability assessment, perform a vulnerability assessment to identify weaknesses in the network, applications, and other systems. And the way that should work is you want to identify the riskiest first and take care of those first and work your way down. But I can guarantee you, you're not going to find every vulnerability, not the first time around. Threat analysis, analyze potential threats, both internal and external. This includes understanding types of cyber threats relevant to the organization. What compliance and regulatory rules do you need to follow? What type of governance do you have in your business already? Do Do you need to comply with GDPR? Do you do business in Europe? Do you do business in California? You need to comply with CCPA. Are you a healthcare provider or someone that works with a healthcare provider? Then you need to comply with HIPAA. Do you accept credit cards? You need to comply with PCI DSS. Audit logs and reports. Examine past audit logs and reports for any recurring issues or past breaches. Very time-consuming job, and that's why there are systems that do this automatically. User access and identity verification. I'm gotta tell you, I've gone into numerous businesses and found stale ex-employee accounts that were still active on domain control servers, and that's risky. I've seen stale accounts for remote access, risky. They were still active. So user access review, assess how users currently access the network and resources, determine if access controls are based on the principle of least privilege, identity and authentication practices, evaluate current identity verification authentication practices, including password policies and multi-factor authentication. I have gone into businesses where none of the workstations had passwords on them. That was like one of the first fixes we did in there. Or weak passwords. You know, if you're, sometimes it was username John, password John, very risky. Network architecture and segmentation, analyze the network, make sure that you understand how data flows through the network. And then remote access, assess how remote access is managed, especially with the increase in remote work scenarios. Incident response and recovery, you need to have an incident response plan. And that would include how you recover. Employee awareness and training. Make sure your employees are getting trained, not only on how zero trust works, but what cyber threats are out there, how they can protect themselves and the business they work for, and what they should do in the event of a breach, in the event of a suspected breach, in the event of a phishing email. All of these things need to be trained on. User behavior analysis, analyze user behavior for any patterns that might indicate risky or non-compliant actions. Shadow IT kind of falls into that category, and that means that, you know, they're installing applications that help them with their job but haven't been approved. And this is where the zero trust model comes into play, by the way. Performance and scalability, network performance, evaluate the performance of the current network and security infrastructure. Keep in mind that if your performance of your network and your systems is poor, users are going to take shortcuts, and shortcuts can be risky. Scalability assessment, consider how scalable the existing network and security solutions are in relation to the planned zero trust strategy. Leveraging external expertise, bring in outsiders, you know, like us. Post-assessment actions, benchmarking. So benchmarking, making sure that you're meeting certain goals and best practices, and then post-assessment actions, report and documentation, compile a comprehensive report detailing the findings from the security posture assessment. Prioritization of issues, again, it should be from your zero trust implementation should be from inside out, top down, and it should also be from criticality. So your most critical stuff should be addressed. Your riskiest stuff should be addressed first. Keeping the business objectives in mind, right? So you have to have a BIA, a business impact analysis before you can go ahead and implement this. And this all should be done 6 months, 7 months, maybe. Stakeholder engagement, again, letting know everybody that's involved with this that's going to impact should be at some level involved and engaged with. And then the assessment phase is crucial for setting a clear baseline from which to build the zero trust framework. So your gap analysis, so to speak, this is where we are, this is where we want to be. Identify sensitive data. Where is your sensitive data stored? So identifying sensitive data in systems is a critical step in any organization's security strategy. It involves data classification, categorize data based on sensitivity and importance. This includes personal information, financial records, intellectual property, and other confidential materials. asset inventory, catalog all systems, hardware and software, understand where sensitive data is stored, processed, and transmitted. And you should try to keep that sensitive data in one central location as much as possible. Again, factoring in network segmentation. The more that data is scattered, if you have, one server with sensitive data, and then you have 12 workstations with sensitive data, that's a problem. You need to get all of that data onto one server, and then this way it's easier to protect. Risk assessment, evaluate the potential risks and threats to sensitive data and systems. Access controls, identify who has access to sensitive data and whether such access is necessary and appropriately restricted. And regulatory compliance. Again, GDPR, CCPA, CTDPA, HIPAA, PCI DSS, FTC safeguards, all of those, and more, plenty more. This is what you need to do. Network segmentation, again, we talked about this. Why do we want to implement this though? Why are we segmenting our network even more than it used to be? Creating these micro segmentation, micro networks. Biggest reason, lateral movement limitation. So when hackers get in to your network, they don't just get in and get out. They typically get in and stay there for a while, sometimes up to years, but usually weeks and months. And why they do this is because they were trying to see where else they can get within the network. And that's why network segmentation is important, because you limit, again, I'll use the term blast area, of a breach, because they're only going to get so far within that network, the overall umbrella network, because they're blocked into one segmentation of that network. So if you have 150 users on a network and you divide it up into 10 micro segmentation networks, now they're limited to 15 computers instead of 150, and what they might gain access to is limited because of that. Enhanced security controls. Different segments can have tailored security controls based on their specific risk profiles and the sensitivity of the data they contain. Incident containment and response. In case of breach, it's easier to isolate and contain the threat in a smaller segmented part of the network, aiding in more effective incident response. Regulatory compliance. Segmentation helps in compliance with regulations that require protection of sensitive data, such as health records and financial information. And then network segmentation is a proactive measure to enhance the security posture of an organization by minimizing the potential damage from cyber attacks or breaches. We're just controlling the size of the blast area. Data protection through encryption involves converting sensitive information into coded format. So you've more than likely interacted with encrypted data before. Maybe you don't realize you have, but you have. And all that means is it's not readable to the human eye. And in order to make it readable to the human eye, you have to find a way to decrypt it. This is what ransomware gangs do to try to get you to pay the ransom. They make it so that you can no longer read the data. It's not usable to a human by encrypting it. So now it's encrypted, and they tell you the only way it's going to get decrypted is by you paying. So there are data at rest, which means it's stored, not moving, not in use. That should be encrypted on a Windows machine that's BitLocker. I've heard rumors it's going to be turned on by default, but I have, just purchased laptops for a business and it was not on by default. I had to turn it on. So you probably have to still turn it on. There are third-party softwares out there. We do utilize one that also protects data in use. And in transit means, it's being transmitted. It's being sent over the internet or within the network, typically email or file transfers. That data should also be encrypted. So again, going into a newer potential client, noticed that they had a file transfer software on their server that had sensitive data, and they were using FTP, file transfer protocol, which is not encrypted. It is wide open, and anybody can connect a device to the network and see what's being transferred. They don't even have to steal it. They can see what's being transferred. Not encrypted, should not be used whatsoever. Effective data protection strategies include strong encryption algorithms and secure key management practices, crucial for maintaining the confidentiality and integrity of sensitive information in today's digital landscape. Implementation steps include assessing current security posture. We just talked about that, identifying sensitive data, implementing strong user authentication, and deploying security technologies like firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, endpoint detection, and so forth. And then finally, continuous monitoring and adjustment. Not a set it and forget it type deal. You will be working on this continuously. The goal is to be at a much more resilient state within a few months, 6 months, 9 months, something along those lines. The longer it takes, the less likely the business will be happy with what you're doing. Some of the challenges and considerations, especially for small businesses, implementing zero trust can be challenging due to budget constraints. I would again say that it's not as expensive as you might think, but budget constraints might be a problem. These businesses often have limited financial resources to invest in advanced cybersecurity infrastructure and expertise. I, however, can share with you dozens of businesses that have no problem affording it and are very happy with it. The cost of upgrading legacy systems, again, I would say get off of those legacy systems, move to cloud. That would be the fastest and most least expensive method of addressing those costs. And training can be significant. Balancing the need for robust security with these financial limitation requires careful planning and prioritization. Small businesses might need to seek cost-effective solutions like open source tools or scalable security services to implement zero trust principles without overextending their budget. You also will get user pushback. I have had some pushback implementing zero trust with some businesses when they realize they can't just download and install an application free will, that somebody's going to see what that application is before allowing it. Some people aren't too happy about that until you explain to them why. Once they understand the why and that they're technically not being limited, depending on the scope, depending on the business and the scope. In this case, my example was an owner of the business. He wanted to install some application. I don't even remember what it was now, but it got blocked and I had to allow it after reviewing it. And so once you explain that this is just the second set of eyes on it to make sure that they're not installing something that's risky to the business and the data that they have, he's okay with it. Balancing security with user convenience. So I just talked about that. Okay. The need for employee training, awareness, and implementing zero trust is critical. Employees are often the first line of defense against cyber threats, and their understanding of security protocols is essential. Training should cover recognizing and responding to potential security threats, understanding the importance of following security procedures, and the proper handling of sensitive information. Regular awareness sessions can help security at the forefront of an employee's minds, ensuring that they remain vigilant and proactive in maintaining the organization's cybersecurity posture. This training is not a one-time event. How many of us have worked for companies where you get your annual training in January and you are done for the year? No, this is an ongoing event that you need to continue doing repeatedly, and that could be in the form of micro trainings. It could be of course, your annual trainings. It could be in the form of meetings, where you bring up topics in meetings, sending an email with awareness of an event that might be occurring that we need to be careful of in our own networks. There's many ways to do employee awareness training. So we implemented zero trust in a small retail outlet. 3 stores, not a large business by any stretch. I think they have 12 or 13 employees total. Wasn't a big business. They were faced with security challenges, as a lot of retail places do. And typically, retail is not high up on the list of cybersecurity, meaning they don't always consider cybersecurity first, as this is the case with the Target breach a few years ago. But once it happens, then let's open up the wallets and get this done. They were concerned about the number of cyber threats that potentially could be coming through. And they were right to be concerned. After reviewing some of their stuff, email accounts, some of the browsing history, some of the other stuff that was going on in the business, applications that were running that shouldn't have been running, things like that, we decided we were going to help them implement zero trust. So the company adopted a zero trust framework. They focused on identity verification. They did not have multi-factor authentication turned on. They do now. As a matter of fact, they weren't even using Microsoft or Google. They were using another third-party POP email. We moved them to Microsoft, and then, of course, turned on multi-factor authentication and used secure, strong passwords. We've talked about strong passwords in the past, but strong passwords are 20 plus characters. Or, I'm sorry, 12 plus characters. I typically go to 20, but at least 12 in everything, uppercase, lowercase numbers, and special characters. Shouldn't be guessable words either. Micro-segmentation, we segmented the stores. They were all interconnected. We segmented them individually. There was no reason to have them all together. There wasn't a central server. Everything is SaaS, so software as a service. And continuous monitoring. We're still monitoring to this day for unauthorized logins. The stores close at 9 o'clock. Is anybody logging in at 10 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning? We're still monitoring these things, or 6 o'clock in the morning. They don't open until 8 o'clock. So we're monitoring these things. We did this in just under 6 months total with 3 locations. Results: reduced breaches. There was a significant decrease in security breaches, attempted breaches even, because what happens when you turn on multi-factor authentication or all these other zero trust implementations is that the attackers kind of fall away a little bit, because the average attacker isn't going to get around zero trust. Most attackers don't have the knowledge to even try to get around zero trust. Improved compliance. Now, the only real compliance they had, they're in Connecticut, so they have the Connecticut DPA, the Data Privacy Act. They also have PCI DSS, so their compliance improved. Enhanced data protection. Customer data became more secure, boosting consumer trust. What did they learn? They start from the inside and worked out. So we started from inside their network and worked our way out. A couple little hiccups along the way, but we got through it. Employee training was crucial. The employees there did not understand the risks of, running outdated applications or browsing the internet to unsafe sites and things. They did not understand the risks they were putting the business at when they did these things. And so now they do. Now they're more prepared for the inevitable, because whether you believe it or not, your business is being attacked. It is happening today. You're getting phishing emails. You may be getting knocks at the door, proverbially, meaning, somebody's knocking at your network door. These are all the different things. I took over a client almost 2 years ago, and their router was exposed to the internet, meaning there was a web page login for the router, web page management login for the router. And when I looked at the logs, the number of attempts to log into the router from the web in just a matter of minutes was astronomical, in the thousands, maybe. I don't remember the numbers, hundreds, thousands, but it was unbelievable, the amount of attempted logins. So it was only a matter of time before somebody successfully logged into that router and was able to gain access to the network. So, of course, we disabled web-facing management for that router. But that's just an example of of the continuous adjustment being needed. Benefits: enhanced overall cybersecurity posture. You're going to also have a better trust from your clients, your customers. Better control and visibility over network access, and increased resilience against cyber attacks. And again, that's just going to raise your trust levels with your clients. Best practices for effective implementation. I don't know why I cannot say this word today. Implementation of zero trust. Start small. Begin with a critical segment of your network. Learn and scale up. Prioritize identity verification. If you don't have multi-factor authentication, turn it on today. If you don't have strong passwords, turn it on today. And if you don't have a policy of removing inactive accounts, do it today. Educate employees for ongoing management and evaluation, continuous monitoring, regular monitor network activities for unusual patterns, regular audits, conduct frequent security audits and compliance checks, and then update and adapt. Stay updated with the latest security trends and adapt your strategy accordingly. Zero trust is crucial for modern cybersecurity, focusing on never trust, always verify. It involves strict identity verification, microsegmentation, and continuous monitoring. Challenges include budget constraints, balancing security with convenience, and the need for employee training. And I'm going to say this final note: adopting zero trust principles is essential for enhancing security in today's threat landscape. While implementation has its challenges, the benefits far outweigh the difficulties. It's a strategic investment in protecting your organization's data and resources. And remember, at the end of the day, for most of us, that data is not ours, it's our clients' data. We encourage businesses to take proactive steps towards implementing zero trust, ensuring a more secure and resilient digital environment and digital future. And I finished with 3 minutes to spare. Can't tell zero trust is top of mind here at Nuage Tech. If there are questions, I don't see any in the chat, but if there are questions, feel free to send us an email, support@nuage.tech, nwaj.tech. Facebook, LinkedIn, don't really use Twitter anymore. Oh, next slide, here you go. Instagram and YouTube. This will be up on YouTube later today, or I don't know, later today, but soon. So if there is nothing else, until next time, stay secure.